In the dark corridors of Roman history, where marble halls echo with whispers of power and betrayal, few names strike such a chilling chord as that of Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, a man better remembered by his childhood nickname, Caligula. To the Romans, he was both a savior and a monster. To his soldiers, he was a god and a tyrant. And to history, he is the emperor whose reign burned with brilliance and madness, leaving a scar across the face of the empire. But Caligula was not born a monster. He was born a child, fragile, clever, innocent, cut in the grinding gears of an empire that devoured its own blood. His life was not a tale of random cruelty, but of a boy shaped by trauma, betrayal, and absolute power. The year was 12 AD on the stormy shores of Antium. A child's cry echoed through the villa of Germanicus, Rome's most beloved general. This boy was Gaius, son of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder, grandson of the heroic Agrippa, and great-nephew to Emperor Tiberius. His blood carried the very weight of Rome's destiny. But it was not his name that first made him famous. It was his shoes. As a toddler, Gaius accompanied his father on military campaigns along the Rhine. The legionaries adored the child who tottered through the camps in miniature. Soldiers' boots collegae. With laughter, they nicknamed him Caligula, Little Boots. It was meant as affection. To the hardened men of the legions, he was a lucky charm, a symbol of Roman strength. But as he grew older, the nickname would cling to him like a curse, reminding him that he was never simply Gaius. He was a spectacle, a symbol, a puppet of Rome's expectations. And already shadows were gathering. Germanicus, his father, was the golden hope of Rome, noble, virtuous, adored by the people. But in 19 AD, when Caligula was only 7, Germanicus died suddenly, and serial whispers spoke of poison. Treachery, perhaps even the hand of Emperor Tiberius himself.
Ow.
The empire plunged into mourning, but for young Gaius the loss was more than political. It was the tearing away of the only stable figure in his world. His mother, Agrippina, fierce and ambitious, clashed bitterly with Tiberius, accusing him of murder. The emperor struck back with quiet cruelty. One by one, Caligula's brothers were destroyed, exiled, imprisoned, starved to death. His mother, too, was banished, left to wither in exile, until her proud body could endure no more. The boy who once wore tiny soldier's boots now walked barefoot through a wasteland of grief. He learned early that family ties were fragile, that love could be turned into a weapon, that Rome devoured even its brightest children. He survived by hiding behind a mask, obedient, silent, smiling when watched, burning with hatred within. And so the seeds of cruelty were planted. At age 18, Caligula was summoned to the island of Capri. There, under the decaying shadow of old Emperor Tiberius, he lived in a palace of nightmares. Capri was no paradise. It was a cage of excess, a gilded prison where Tiberius, bloated with paranoia, drowned himself in pleasure and cruelty. Whispers told of unspeakable debaucheries, of children stolen from their homes, of bodies tossed into the sea. And in the midst of this horror, Caligula learned to survive. He played the perfect grandson, bowed, he flattered. He studied the emperor's moods like a gladiator studies his opponent's blade. Inside, his heart boiled with rage. He once confessed, "I am nursing a serpent in my breast for Rome." For 6 long years he walked through a world of suspicion, knowing that any false move could mean his death. He watched Tiberius execute senators, generals, and even family members. He watched heads fall for a single careless word. And he smiled through it all, hiding the storm that grew inside him. When at last, in 37 AD, Tiberius died, perhaps smothered by the Praetorian prefect Macro Caligula. At just 24, emerged as Rome's new emperor. The boy of the camps, the orphan of exile, the silent shadow of Capri now held the world in his hands. The people rejoiced. Rome exploded in celebration. Here was the grandson of Germanicus, the hero's son. Here was youth, vitality, hope, a chance to heal the wounds of Tiberius's terror. At first, Caligula seemed to embody everything Rome had longed for. He freed political prisoners, recalled the exiles, honored his family's memory. He staged magnificent games, distributed wealth to the people, restored the joy of empire. For a brief, shining moment, He was loved as no emperor had been since Augustus. But power is a dangerous wine, and Caligula drank deeply. Only months into his reign, Caligula fell gravely ill. Some say it was poisoning, others speak of epilepsy, or perhaps the weight of stress. For weeks he lingered near death, the empire holding its breath. When he finally recovered, something in him had changed. The mask he had worn all his life cracked open. The boy of grief, the youth of paranoia, the man who had tasted absolute power, emerged transformed. Rome would never forget what followed. Caligula declared himself not merely emperor, but a living god, strode through temples dressed as Apollo, as Jupiter, even as Venus. Statues of himself were erected in shrines, his face grafted onto the images of gods. He demanded worship, sacrifices, prayers not to Rome, not to Jupiter, but to him. Some laughed, some trembled, but all obeyed. And then came the cruelty. The boy who had watched his family destroyed, who had survived by hiding his pain, now wielded pain as a weapon. He mocked senators, humiliated nobles, executed rivals with theatrical flourish. He took delight in fear. A man was invited to dinner only to find his name already on the death list. Another was ordered to embrace his own wife in front of the emperor, then sent to execution for the act. Caligula's palace became a theater of horror. History remembers him as insane. The emperor who appointed his horse Incitus, a priest, who dreamed of making him consul. The ruler who declared war on Neptune, commanding his soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of conquest. But was it madness or strategy? Some historians whispered that these stories were distortions, exaggerated by his enemies after his fall. Perhaps the horse was a mocking joke against the senators. Perhaps the seashells were symbols of victory in Britain. Yet whether madness or mockery, the effect was the same. Caligula blurred the line between comedy and terror until Rome could no longer tell the difference. By the 4th year of his reign, the laughter had soured into rage. The senators despised him. The praetorians who once protected him now feared him. Even the common people, once fed and entertained, began to murmur against his extravagance. He had turned Rome into a stage for his vengeance, and everyone in it knew they could be the next victim. On a cold January morning in 41 AD, Caligula walked through the underground corridors of the Palatine. After attending a theater performance, a group of guards led by Cassius Chaerea surrounded him. They struck swiftly. Blades flashed. The emperor, who thought himself a god, fell screaming to the marble floor, cut down at 28. Wife and daughter were murdered soon after. The boy in little boots, the child who once charmed an army, now lay in a pool of his own blood, abandoned by the empire he had ruled. Was Caligula a monster born, or a child broken? Was he insane, or was he simply the product of a dynasty poisoned by paranoia and absolute power? Perhaps he was both a wounded boy who grew into a tyrant, a mask that consumed the man beneath. His reign was brief, his deeds infamous, his story twisted by enemies and myth, yet in the echoes of Rome's ruins, his name still lingers, a symbol of how absolute power corrupts absolutely. For in Caligula we see not just an emperor gone mad, but a mirror of empire itself, beautiful, terrifying, and doomed to consume its own children.